Governance and Priorities meeting to order at 7:04, and we will begin with an adoption of the agenda. Do we have any additions?
No, Your Worship.
Anything from council? I'll ask for a motion to adopt the agenda.
I'll move the agenda be adopted as presented.
Thank you, Councilor Colton. Any discussion on that? All in favor? Any opposed? Okay, that's carried. And that will bring us to adoption of the minutes, item 3.1. Any errors or omissions from our last meeting? And Councilor Cush, can you hear us online? Not just yet. How about now? Can you hear us now, Councilor Cush?
Yeah, can you see me?
Yeah, we can see you, we can hear you, so. We're just looking for a motion to adopt the agenda, or sorry, the minutes from the last meeting. Councilor Wilhelm.
I'll motion to adopt the minutes as presented.
Thank you. Any discussion on that? All in favor? And
In favor?
thanks, Councilor Cush. That is passed, carried. So we'll begin with 6.1 draft policy on asset management. As soon as this loads. Kara, you're gonna take us through this. I know you've been diligently dealing with this the last little while, so this is your show.
So good evening, Your Worship and fellow councillors. I don't know how formal this is. Yeah, we've been working away on asset management, our initiatives. Tonight we're bringing forward the policy for discussion. The creation of the policy strategy plan and roadmap are part of our MAP grant that we had through FCM. And the deadline for that is November 1st. It was extended a little bit just because we had such a late approval. So the final report will be on December 1st. That's when that's due. So over the next couple months, you're going to be seeing some documents coming forward to you. The policy tonight, which is done, and ready for discussion. The strategy is in draft, and we've also attached that for you guys to take a look at. The plan and the roadmap will be next, and we'll have a presentation for you guys on that later in November once it's finalized. And then all of those documents together set up the framework for our asset management program. So if we can, I don't know if you share on the screen, but if you look at the first attachment, I guess, how do you show through the first attachment? I guess you guys can see it looks like an asset management framework. Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay. So there, your guys, when we set council sets their strategic priorities up at the top there with the mission statements. The asset management policy follows in below, and then we have our asset management strategy which helps implement the policy, and then we'll have our asset management plan and roadmap. And then once those are complete, we use those documents to build the capital works plans, the operation maintenance, and the long-term financial plans. So just to kind of give you guys an idea of the overall framework for the system. And then we can go through some of the highlights from the policy. So basically the policy is spelling out the underlying principles that the county intends to follow when using asset management practices in order to achieve all of our the county's strategic plans. It's been organized into 5 categories. So I guess the asset management principles, first of all, we're developing them and we're going to be implementing them over time as we work through the initiatives. I can just start going through the 5 main categories, if that works. Okay. So the first one, sustainability and environmental adaptability. So when we're looking at risk, life cycle costs, and defined levels of service, when we're investing in our infrastructure assets, we want to be looking at the high risk ones first. Without replacing it, maybe you'd have major downtime, which could also leave people at risk, safety-wise. We want to take, take some water. We want to undertake a holistic approach to the asset management planning and consider the socio-cultural, environmental, and economic factors. So we want to make sure we're considering the unique needs of the cultural demographics of our ratepayers as well as the age demographics. They might have different demands for levels of service. When we're looking at the environmental, we're sort of thinking when we're considering infrastructure replacement and extending the asset life, we're doing that to be efficient, maybe reducing waste and the use of virgin materials before we dispose of the asset. Utilizing available information to forecast changes in the demographic service demands. So observing trends in our traffic counts, population growth. I know planning and development send new subdivision approvals over to the infrastructure team, so they're able to look at it and see if that's going to be an impact for any of their assets that they have, maybe widening roads, changing the road surface. And then also D there is consider how the increased frequency and severity of climatic events may directly impact our levels of service. That seems to be one that's coming up quite a bit, and I know FCM is focusing on definitely climate events and climate change. The next category is the holistic and big picture approach. So we just want to have improved collaboration between our departments to create efficiencies in our operations. So we have cross-departmental communication processes and functional groups to support asset management planning. We have our asset management steering committee that we've developed internally, and then through that we have meetings with other working groups. If we meet with our water sewer guys and our road guys, sometimes we meet all together and sometimes it's independent. We want to consider the state of our infrastructure assets that we own or we manage as the whole county as well as individually. Maximize efficiency of existing infrastructure by managing the condition, risk, and delivered level of service. So typically assets that are in good condition run better than those that are poor. We're reducing risk by timely maintenance and replacement. Simple things as reducing the risk maybe for your water treatment plant by putting a fence around it. So just identifying some of those things. Improve asset evaluation methods to continually monitor and improve the overall state of our infrastructure assets and service delivery. So we're trying to implement metrics. So we're doing condition assessments on majority of our assets. We have a lot of those completed. I would say most of them completed. Developing level of service criteria, working on our risk model, and annual reviews, so that if you're measuring something, then you're knowing if you're making improvements or not. Move on to service delivery to customers and information management. So basically here providing defined levels of service that balance our stakeholder expectations with the related cost and the risk, following our community's priorities. Maybe some of the highlights. On B there, deliver target levels of service by effectively and efficiently managing all of our infrastructure networks. So we want to make sure we're doing our maintenance on our equipment so it doesn't break down. But we're not wanting to overspend on something if the level of service is fine as is. And we also don't want to replace something before it's needed. So it's definitely timing.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I just had a question.
Go ahead.
So I think I have a good understanding of how asset management relates to assets, from a high level at least. But I'm struggling to understand how asset management helps you define service levels. Is there just the COSO? I don't really understand that.
So service levels, like they're a big part of it when you're looking at the service level is sort of just saying the things that we're doing. So some of it is we're re-graveling our roads every 3 years. Like that's a level of service that we're providing. So then it's like a metric that you can measure, I guess. That would be one example of a level of service. Everything that we provide to our ratepayers, I guess, costs something. So we're trying to put a value on that.
So the steering committee or the team will come up with a metric to attach a value to that?
And then level of service too, I guess, would be like how long, we have some metrics that we've started and we're starting to track, but if you have your water treatment plant down for so many days, there's certain assets that our infrastructure guys, I guess the water sewer guys would like to make sure that they have everything fixed within 12 hours. They don't want people without running water for 12 hours. So that's a level of service and it costs so much money to have staff to do that and to make sure your assets are in good shape to produce that.
Okay.
And then we can go back if that's our level of service and we can measure off of that. And
Gotcha, okay.
kind of like find a gap. Well, we had this many gaps in our level of service where people were without water, or we had this many line breaks. So we're starting to like track our line breaks every year. We had 3 this year, and how come we had them? So then how do we improve that for next year to provide a better level of service?
Gotcha, okay, thank you.
Yeah, okay. Then we're on C there, maintain transparency with stakeholders regarding level of service, targets, and asset performance. So here we have notification of service interruptions that we can track. They use the service tracker, which again is when ratepayers call in, maybe there's have complaints about the road surface, flooding culverts, annual reports, and then measuring performance versus our targets. So we need to be setting targets and then measuring against them. Ensuring we're in alignment with legislative, statutory, and regulatory requirements. All of our managers make sure they stay up to date on those and as well follow the strategic objectives from Council's 2022-25 plan. Monitor and periodically review the defined levels of service and update accordingly. So again, just more of the monitoring, setting the levels of service, and keeping track of those, making sure we're doing them. And finding ways to improve them. So if we're tracking them, then we're able to improve them. Then we have the fiscal responsibility and decision making. Here we want to demonstrate fiscal responsibility in our decision making and develop a repeatable process to make defendable decisions for our capital transactions. So that's kind of the ultimate goal. We need to be considering the intergenerational effects of infrastructure investment throughout the asset management decision-making process. So maybe postponing something now for road maintenance might save us money in the short term, but in the long term, it's going to cost us more and provide a lower level of service. So just having the ability to look at those and weigh the pros and cons to each of them and have a process to go through that with. Conduct ongoing asset management research to develop best practices. So we're definitely looking at asset management related resources, going to workshops, utilizing new tools. We're members with IMA, and they have 3 workshops a year that we go to. So, or I've been going to them. Maybe we'll have some other people that come with me to those. But they're a great networking opportunity between all the other municipalities in Alberta, and they usually bring in guest speakers to come and speak about certain hot topics, like using LiDAR for road condition assessments and different things. We need to be considering the full life cycle costs, including acquisition, operation, maintenance, and disposal when we're making our infrastructure planning decisions to minimize the long-term cost of ownership. So sometimes things could appear cheaper upfront, but down the road they may cost us a fortune to maintain. And then continue and refine our infrastructure maintenance strategies, which sustain defined levels of service and maximize our asset value. So we have these strategies such as re-graveling that we talked about, ditching, valve exercising when the guys go out there to do the hydrant flushing, they always exercise the valves, make sure everything's working. And then of course complying with some of the other financial tracking and reporting requirements. We have our yearly financial audit, the FIR I think it is, and the statistical information. Both of those are submitted to municipal affairs. And I guess one of the biggest ones for asset management would be 2.5 is the continual improvement. We want to develop a culture of continual improvement to progress all of our asset management processes and ensure the delivery of services are efficient and effective. So definitely continuing to seek improvement in asset management processes. So like we had mentioned, the conferences and the workshops. Monitor and review our asset management processes for progress and effectiveness, make revisions where applicable to improve on, promote the long-term departmental efficiency and effectiveness and service delivery and asset management decision making. So primarily this is happening right now through our asset management steering group. So we're working mostly with the policy and strategy, and then we'll be refining the plan and the roadmap and then sharing that with the rest of administration and you guys as well, council. And assess progress and provide education and training to further develop the asset management program. So we had service tracker and asset management training back in June. We had 25 staff that went through service tracker training, and a few less than that came through the asset management portion. They learned how to use WebMap and do some of the edits in there where we're keeping track of a lot of our data. And we also just had a workshop with, I think it was like 9 or 10 managers and department heads for starting to work on our risk matrix and identify all of our critical assets. And then for continuous improvement on E there, we also have that we will be reviewing the policy and the strategy every 2 to 5 years. So I think at the beginning, when we're developing all these, the revisions will happen more often until we get it refined. Does anyone have any questions on the, I guess, like the 5 main asset management principle categories?
Councillor Colkin?
Yeah, through the chair to Kara. This is just a curiosity, it's a question. We have a number of assets that I don't know whether they're inventory that would be the Sandhills, Viga, where the motocross goes. There's some of the, like Goose Lake, I believe, there's a day use area. I know that I've had conversation with folks in Drayton Valley, that they actually look at some of the rivers, lakes, streams as assets, even though at this point in time, they may not be doing any management there, but it's included in their overall strategy. And I'm just wondering whether there's been any discussion as to how we would address that if we wanted to further do development there.
Okay, so we don't have those in our system yet categorized. I mean, we do have like parks. We would have our own day use sites.
Yeah.
And the assets at them, like the outhouses and signs and things. And we do say in the policy that, like, we will add natural assets in as we go, but they're not included in there yet.
Thank you.
Councillor Dean?
And thanks, Mr. Chair. So Kara, just coming back, so this document's gonna be released to the public, right? When council adopts it? And I don't.
Even have this discussion where it started eating donuts.
Whoops.
So just for clarification, coming back to that, how you determine, how a service level and asset management mesh. I wonder if you would consider just adding something like in B, in that section that deals with service level. B says deliver target levels of service by effectively and efficiently managing all infrastructure networks. That's in the document. I think, it's the same as the preamble there that we've just gone over? No?
Okay, sorry, where are you looking? You're looking at the actual policy?
Yeah, I'm looking at the policy, page 11.
2.3B?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm just, like, for clarity, I'm wondering if we could add some kind of verbiage that says, at the end of that sentence, create a metric that identifies a cost to the service level. I guess what I'm thinking is that asset management is all about objective data that we can quantify, and
So you're wanting to know a cost for the level of service?
yeah, is that what you told me earlier when I asked the question? That's what you guys would do, is you would establish service levels and then identify what that costs?
Yeah, we would figure that out for sure, because we know how much it costs to re-gravel, like a certain length of the road, for example, or whatever.
Sure.
We'd have to gather that data.
Yeah, and I mean, maybe it's just me, but I'm just thinking that section is pretty subjective, whereas the policy is a pretty objective document, or objective policy.
Yeah, it's fairly broad, right, the policy, yeah.
So I'll just leave it with you. That's just a suggestion.
Yeah.
Any other questions from council? Councillor Wilhelm?
I mostly just have a comment, like I went through this document from beginning to end. I really like the verbiage and the way it was set up. It's a great document. And what it's gonna do for all of us is take a lot of subjective decision-making out of the council decisions when you can give us, you know, this road's gonna cost this, and if we don't do this, it's gonna cost us this in 2 years. That takes a lot of our opinion-based decision-making or subjective decision-making out of our hands, but allows us to make a much more objective decision off of quantitative values as opposed to qualitative ones. So I really enjoy this document. So I just wanted to give you kudos, and you and your team for getting it together. Looks great.
Thank you.
I'll just go ahead and ask a question. How long have you been working on this for? Like I'm not that like I'm saying, when is this gonna be done? I think people need to understand that, you know, cataloging all the assets that we have, every, you know, piece of sewer, where the valves are located, the fire hydrants, the, different culverts. I mean, you're cataloging all of that in this asset management plan. So how long have you been at this for?
So working on the policy and the strategy, we started that probably in January. It was a little bit, later after the fall. And then just kind of working on it gradually with Unisite is our consultant that's helping us with that. We still have a lot of data that isn't in. So we have our major classes we have our water, sewer, that's in there. That data is really good. Our road data is in there. It needs a little bit of cleaning up. Our bridges and culverts are in there. Lance is collecting culvert data right now. I did pull some numbers because I thought it was interesting. It's definitely not a speedy process because he's going through, there's an approach culvert in all these subdivisions, and he's going through and collecting like every single one. So he started, we have just over 2,156 records currently when I look today, and just over 1,000 of them are new locates. So he's found like 1,000 new culverts that weren't there in our system. And he's not done yet, so he'll find a lot more. He's done 955 condition assessments. So he's been working on that for most of July and August.
And that's an important aspect of the asset management, is that the condition assessments are being done, whereas we may have known that there was a culvert that existed. However, we've never done the condition assessment to see should that be replaced in 2 years or 15 years or 25 years, right? Yeah. So.
And the idea is to really replace this before we lose part of a road because a culvert hooks underneath the road and blows it out in a thaw event or something like that. So one other question I've got, and I'm on page 14 of the presentation, figure 3 of the asset management sustainability delivery for FCM 2019, on the graphic there. And you talk about on the outside wheel here, there's plan, implement, and assess, and then on the inside wheel middle wheel, you've got communicate, engage, and review. So we keep talking about service levels, and I know this is something that this council really wants to engage the public on, is having a conversation with everybody on what are the current service levels, how much are they costing, how are we going, would they like them increased, decreased, stay the same, and how do we come up with a way to pay for that? So within this program, where are we in a timeline for being able to have that conversation with residents on service levels and say, and since roads are the ones that we always get the biggest feedback on, where are we on being able to have that conversation about roads?
So it's interesting that you bring that up, or timely, I guess I should say, but FCM has some other grant money, and RMA, AUMA, and IMA are offering some extra training. So that elected officials training is part of it. And then they also have a beginner cohort and an intermediate cohort, and then some small working groups. So we would like to apply for being on the intermediate cohort, just because the beginner one is developing your policy and strategy and your plan, and we have some of that stuff done. We've identified a lot of things we have to implement, which I'll show you afterwards, but we have, like, I guess you could say, like, the overall structure. We just need to now take the time to start putting a whole bunch of these things in place. And the roadmap will give us a 1 to 3 year kind of time frame for those things, and then we kind of slot them in, and those are the things that we'll work through over the next several years to start making better, I guess, asset management decisions. But the intermediate cohort is to work on levels of service and a communication plan. And that would start in December. I think it's like 4 or 5 months. I could give you a couple of details about that. It's about 2 or 3 in-person meetings, and you can send like maybe 4 people from a municipality to go. An elected official could join in as well. And they sort of grouped you with other municipalities in your area that would be working on the same thing, so you can, you know, build relationships with other municipalities to help further your processes as well. And then you'll end up with a template for developing level of service and a communication plan. So I don't know if there's other municipalities. I did reach out to Hinton to ask if they were possibly going to do it, just because I knew somebody from there, but it seems like you apply and then they would potentially match you up, and they're trying to have a few regional cohorts. So you'd have those in-person meetings as well as a weekly, I think they said about 3 meetings a month online with your group, and there's experts, asset management experts, I guess, that help walk us through the process to developing those,
So not quite for this budget cycle?
No.
Yeah, so according to our strategic plan, they're scheduled for February of 2024. However, again, those targets are to be completed by, right? So our start date is June of next year.
Okay. I know it's frustrating, like this has been going on for, like, the data collection and everything around this program takes time, so, but I think it's gonna bear out, some really good results for us as well. Any other questions from council? Council
I'd just like
Prestige?
to make a statement from, through the chair to council, is where we started out 4 years ago, it's really sent us in a different direction of what we needed. I think this is gonna be such a benefit, not for just us, but councils in 10, 20 years from now, they'll be able to use this data. I think it's the best thing we've done.
Councilor Colgan?
Yeah, I guess I would like to say that part of the, what I see here is, first of all, what we talked about earlier, condition, or, the condition of the assets that we didn't even know weren't even inventoried is really important. And also the risk part of it, which, we're seeing continuously in the slides and stuff that are going on in the different areas. And those, once you build those in there, then you have a way better understanding of what, decisions in the future where we don't develop things because the risk is too high, and maybe even where we get rid of those things. So, yeah, I can see this being incredibly beneficial for us. And that work can't be easy.
It's good though, we have a really good team to work with,
Yeah.
it just takes a lot of time, that's all, yeah.
Actually, I did have a question.
Councilor Wilhelm.
To the chair to Kara. So this policy that you're gonna be, if we vote to do it, to send to council for approval, this will just be an initial revision of it, correct? Like, as we define levels of service, we'll revise the document with more information as we continue to build it? Is that kind of the plan?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
I figured so, but I just wanted to ask.
Yeah, and I think that's fairly common, like, I think some of the municipalities I've talked to, like, they're on, edition 2 for sure of their policy, and their strategy is you add more and then you update it. And as you learn more, I think it's fairly new for everybody, so it's not like there's a template necessarily to follow. So you I guess we do the best we can at the start and start working with it, and as we find things that are gonna work better for us, just make those improvements.
And I think an important thing to note too here is that there's a lot of, this is so strongly supported at the provincial and the federal level, under asset management, like, it's so, believed in that this is a good method to go forward and actually, manage assets in not only a responsible manner, but also a cost-effective manner, that the grant levels that are available out there to implement it. And in some cases, I think Ontario, for example, has legislation that says you can't have a municipality that doesn't have asset management. So every municipality in Ontario is running the asset management. They're also making some of these grants dependent on asset management plan in place, so you can't apply for it unless you have an asset management plan. So I think this puts us ahead of the curve, and yeah, well done. So
I think there's a lot of things that we already do internally too, they're just not formalized. So this provides the documentation to formalize what the guys in the field are already seeing and doing, and they're recommending the worst roads, but then this puts a metric there where we did the condition assessment, and this is where it's ranked based on all the other ones, and it's riskier because of this, this, and this. So it formalizes the process for sure.
okay, so we have a recommended action. Oh, Councillor Dean.
Yeah, I was just gonna move that the Governance and Priorities Committee direct administration to forward draft policy 7101 asset management to council for their consideration.
Okay, motion on the floor from Councillor Dean. Any discussion on that motion? All in favor? I see Councillor Kush, so that is passed. Wrong side of my agenda here. And my fingers aren't working either. Okay, so our draft policy for asset management, 6.2 is gonna be our draft policy on corporate sponsorship. Why is that not taking me to the right screen? Mr. Roach. Our Economic Development Officer, Bert Roach, is gonna talk to us about this.
Good evening, your worship and council.
Thank you, Kara.
My pleasure to be here in front of you. You've got the RFD and details in front of you, but the policy that's presented tonight, and the recommendation is that we move forward after discussion tonight. This policy 6902, corporate sponsorship, to council for further consideration or for consideration. The alignment of the policy and the goal was to try to simplify and consolidate some of the policies that we already had within our policy handbook. And so there was a couple of things that we tried to address through the development of this. There's some good information there under background. The highlight that I wanted to pick out, when it comes to the corporate partnership, there's a number of ways in which Woodlands County already does this. And our requests range from multi-year agreements that we're asked to enter into, down to can you give us $50 worth of promo items for a door prize. So there's a pretty broad area that we cover through our corporate partnership. Based on last year's numbers, Woodlands contributed over $640,000 in sponsorship to organizations and to individuals. And moving forward into the rationale, the field of corporate sponsorship, corporate partnership, is one that's got a lot of different facets, and other municipalities may have individual policies to address how they intake larger sponsorship donations and things like that, naming rights within facilities, all of that. Some policies are large enough to sort of accommodate all of those kinds of requests. There is both an investment and a revenue side of the equation to consider. However, the policy in front of you tonight, in order to give a point of focus, is focused around the idea of providing guidelines to administration that are going to allow administration, committees, and council to respond quickly and efficiently to our non-grant based requests, because we currently have grant programs that are laid out and all of that. So this would be separate from any of the existing grant programs that Woodlands has. And that moves us into the policy proper. And with that, I want to move your focus through to number 4 under procedures. And the items there from 4.1 to 4.5 really kind of lay out the meat as to the different levels that are being recommended. So one would be if we have a request for sponsorship that's under $500 and is within existing budgets. There's another one there that if it's between 1,000 to 5,000, that would be something that could go to a committee. And then for items that would be over 5,000 that would be multi-year or unbudgeted, those would go to council. So those were sort of some of the highlight points. There's probably more that I can speak on, but I'll stop there and see what council has to say for thoughts and discussion.
Any questions from council? Councilor G?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. Bert, yeah, I think the policy gives pretty good definition and gives administration and the various levels the levers that we need. Just, can you give me an example? So in procedure 4.3, sponsorship requests below $500 may be made verbally if there's enough supporting information and or a positive relationship exists with the requester. Like, does this come about? Do you guys get these calls?
Yes.
Like,
So,
can you give me an example of one?
so one example that pops into my mind, so we have the Christmas markets that are put on by some of our 4-H groups, and they may not have time to do a written request to us, but what they would want they would say, hey, can you give us 2 or 3 sets of items so we can have door prize draws? And so those are things that we, deal with on an annual basis with that group.
Yeah.
But there would be other examples like that would be similar as well.
Sure, okay, thank you.
Yeah, well,
Councilor Coe?
Yeah, through the chair to Bert. Could you give us an example for, just as, we sponsor a party in the park, for example. How does that come about?
So in past years, when we had the Whitecourt Woodlands tourism entity that was jointly funded, jointly established, we actually had a jointly agreed upon Whitecourt Woodlands tourism budget. And since that went away, and I believe it was about 2019, we haven't actually done that level of partnership towards a single event. So the way that would be accommodated through this policy would be under item 4.6, I believe it is, which would be any request over 5,000 that could not be accommodated in an existing budget would have to come to council for approval.
Just a clarification, however, that is part of the ICF arbitration decision that party in the park is included in the town of Whitecourt's, we have to contribute towards that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions, clarifications? No? Okay.
Your worship, members of council, and just a discussion, are the, under 4 are those numbers adequate? Did you like them higher, lower in regards to any of those amounts? We believe it's what we've seen in the past seems to be reasonable in regards to that. However, council may want less flexibility or more flexibility.
Councillor Wilhelm?
I just want to comment, I actually really like the way that you guys structured it in a way that takes a little bit of the red tape away for smaller donations. And as it increases in value, obviously it reaches a point where you have to bring it to council for it. I think what you guys have taken is some disparate policies and made them pretty black and white and accessible across the board. So I think the policy as it sits now looks great.
Any other questions or comments? Yeah, and I think more than anything, as we go along, policies like this are never written in stone, and especially when you have dollar amounts that are worked into the policy, as we find things increasing in value as we go, and we'll end up having to reevaluate the policy. One thing that I'm curious about on this is, do we have, as we're going through these policy and amendments to the policies, do we track within the policy when it is that we'll look at that policy again, or when it will come up again?
Do we have sunset clauses? No. The answer is no. Should we? I've seen where municipalities put sunset clauses that this policy will expire in 5 years and forces you to do it. I've also seen where policies say that this policy shall be reviewed every 3 years, every 5 years, whatever it is, and it requires you to keep a registry, and then when they come up, to have them come forth for council.
Like, I've seen some policies that actually just right up in the top portion say that it was passed in this date,
Yep.
due for review on this date. And, when I first started here, I mean, we were dealing with policies from the 90s, some of them. And
Still are. Yeah.
still are, yes, as we go through this. So I guess as a note, as we're going through this, to make sure that we don't, fall victim to that again. And part of that is this governance and priorities committee that we've formed here to actually be able to go through these things and clean them up. So,
Your worship, members of council, we also have a policy on policy making that we should review, and it may be identified in there to say the revision. And the reason when you said that, it kind of tweaked. I remember seeing that, and I want to go back, and there may be already in our policy on policy making saying that we have to have a review date, and we'll go back and look at that as well.
and I know people think of policy on policy making might be, but it's more of a template.
Yeah.
than policy. Yeah. Okay. Councillor Prestige.
I'll make a motion that the Governance and Priorities Committee direct administration to forward draft policy 6902, corporate sponsorship, to council for consideration.
Okay, very good. Any comment on the motion? Councillor Cush, you're awfully quiet out there online, so I just want to make sure you're able to hear everything and.
Yeah, everything's good. I agree with what everybody said, and I think it's a well-written policy, so I got nothing I can really say about it.
Okay, very good. With that, I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay, any opposed? That is carried. That will bring us to item 6.3, council remuneration. The inside joke is the discussion around the pronunciation of the remuneration word. Okay.
Your worship, members of council, the remuneration policy that is put forth for you for consideration was requested by council at one of their council meetings. We put together all the motions that have affected your pay, and we also indicated that earlier this year, we participated in an annual survey of salaries, which includes council honorariums and benefits, and that is due here this month sometime. I checked this morning with Aaliyah, and it hadn't come in. She anticipated around the middle of September. However, and the only other thing that I would suggest, if council does look at anything that they, is there any other item within the policy itself that council requires some clarification or adjustment?
Okay. Any questions from council on this one? Is the 10% reduction in here that was from, it was what, 2 years ago?
It was, I can tell you in a sec. It was made in 20, April of 20.
Councillor Prestige, sorry, have you got somebody, is somebody online? Councillor Cush?
Yeah, I just want to make one comment for anybody watching this or for the new council. Going back to the extra 10% that we reduced, the misconception some people might have, it's not a pay raise. This was a cut that we took when there was no meetings. There was the odd virtual kind of thing, and most of what we were doing was either on the phone or through email because of COVID. Given that everything is back in the swing and we have the conferences and a lot more in-person meetings and everything else going on now, I feel that we've kept that 10% out for just about a year of being back to this now. It's probably worth putting at least that back into where we were, but just so the conception from people, it's not a pay raise, it's just coming back to where we reduced the pay rate to before.
Is that probably what you were?
Yes, and
Councillor
I
Prestige?
believe we dropped our training budget from 15,000 to 10,000. Seeing that the COVID thing is over and everything, we should put that back in. And one of the other things that I don't agree with is our meetings, our conference we have with RMA should not be part of the training. It's more to do with the business of running the county, not training.
And it's currently in as, so the RMA, the 2 times a year that we go to RMA, that's taken out of the training.
Yeah, and same with the Zone 3 meetings. Because those aren't training. Those are business meetings.
Okay. Any other questions from council?
So,
Councillor Dean?
yeah, just a question about process. So, what this recommendation is asking is, or suggesting, is that this policy gets forwarded to council for consideration. And timelines, like, is this after the org meeting? What would the appropriate timeline be for that?
Yeah, your worship, members of council, that would be entirely up to you. I know that we're in the process of beginning budget deliberations, and on the, 16th meeting? I believe it's the 16th is our next council meeting after the 14th, and then the 28th. The 28th meeting in September, that we'll asking council to pick budget meetings for the month of October. So you are going into that process. However, just so that council's aware that money was reduced slightly in regards to the overall budget. And however, not, because again, not knowing what occurred, we reinstated it in year 2021, I believe it was, right? I
Yes,
look at you, 'cause
I believe, through your worship, I believe it is in the budget, however, not being expended. So it has been added to the budget, but you're under budget on your honorariums.
Yeah, and again, the background on a lot of this is because of the COVID. We weren't having a lot of personal, in-person meetings. We weren't doing a lot of the traveling. Now we're back to this, and it's time consuming, so the two. Oh, Councillor Colton, go ahead.
I just have a question about the mileage. Those of us who drive a lot go over the 5,000 fairly quickly, and it drops. And I guess you really notice it. It's better now because the fuel prices came down too. So I'm just wondering what that.
Yeah. So, your worship, members of council, we follow Revenue Canada's recommended rate and after 5,000. Unfortunately, I know I shouldn't say I know the history, but the rationale behind that is primarily most people that claim mileage are from urban centers, right? And that's where the federal government developed that policy. And that's why it goes down after the 5,000 kilometers.
Okay, fair.
And if you end up over on the mileage, then it becomes taxable benefits. It's like a pay. So, and it's funny. This all came about what 2 years ago, something like that. And it seemed like a lot of not-for-profits, a lot of boards, a lot of people were running into that particular thing. So just about all of them moved over to the CRA. I blew my 5,000 in the first month at RMA. I put over 5,000 on the vehicle in 1 month, in the first month. So do we have any recommendations on this then? There's the timeline. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, your worship, members
Go
of
ahead.
council, I believe that based on the COVID protocol, we reduced your pay by 10%. You're now back meeting in person. Administration can bring an RFD forward for the next council meeting being September that we implement going forth. And then the second motion is that this overall policy in regards to salaries and everything be discussed at a budget meeting for future deliberations, and any adjustments or anything like that can be implemented for January 1st of 2023.
Councillor Wilhelm.
Through the chair to the CEO, I like that course of action. We're going back to the 15,000, so I guess we'll see with regards to the increased costs to going to conferences, et cetera, if that is going to put us above our original amounts for the years again.
Councillor Prestige.
That's something we should look at too, because the cost of these conferences are going up considerably. So that's something we have to consider too.
Okay. So the two motions are going to be to remove the COVID. Oh, we got Councillor Cush. Go ahead, Councillor Cush.
I was just going to use the recommended action that council direct administration to forward policy 1019, council remuneration to council for consideration.
Okay.
I think that would be the first one, part of that motion.
Okay. Any discussion on that motion? All in favor? I see Councillor Cush, that's passed. And then do we have a second one coming out of this then?
No, Your Worship, but he wants to have it at the council meeting. You'll have this further discussion at the council meeting.
Okay. All right. That'll take us past that one. We voted on it? Yep, we voted on it. It was passed. It's going,
Yeah.
it's going to the council meeting. Yep.
So, Your Worship members, just so that council's clear, my two recommended action or motions would be that you re-implement your 10% reduction and that the policy, financial implications of the policy be reviewed at the budget meeting. So there will be two motions at the next council meeting for consideration on this
Right.
matter.
Okay. That will take us to item 6.4. This will be our meeting procedure bylaw, and Corinne Scott, our new legislative services and coordinations, communications coordinator.
I have work to do.
Right?
So at the request of council, we're bringing bylaw 581 meeting procedures here related to the request or the notice of motion from Councillor Dean for public participation. So section 12 in the bylaw deals with council's current procedures related to delegations and presentations. And just before Councillor Dean briefs us on that, as administration was reviewing the bylaw, there are a couple items that should council wish to refresh the meeting bylaw, we could look at flushing out some definitions that aren't in there. Align the bylaw with legislation so you don't have to refer to both documents for your meeting procedures. And really mostly just to provide clarity to eliminate any confusion related to council's procedures. So if council wishes to look at a refresh, administration could maybe bring that back around the timeline for organizational meetings. So again, should council wish to have a look at that. But nonetheless, this bylaw here is related to public participation.
Councillor Dean?
Sure. Thanks, Reid. So, when I made my notice of motion, it was shortly after the majority of council had attended a Whitecourt Town Council meeting where we watched them pass their version of the ICF. One of the things that caught my eye on their meeting agenda was an agenda item called public input session. So I wasn't sure whether public input session essentially meant the same thing as a delegation. If the rules around their public input session were similar to what our rules around a delegation are. So I just did a little digging and found out that they're not. That public input session that appears not only on their council meeting agenda, but also they call it P&P, we call it GMP, they call it P&P. It's there as well. And it just allows a member of the public to come without going through the formal process of applying through administration to be put on the agenda, to just come and voice a question or concern. And it was timely for me because I had 2 or 3 residents ask me, can we come to the council meeting? And so I said, of course you can come, they're all public. And I explained what our process was. And it was, well, can't we just come and ask questions? And I said, no, you can't right now, like our procedure bylaw doesn't allow for it. So I'm asking council to consider, and I mean, the RFD is suggesting that we look at this after our org meeting. So I don't know if council wants some time to think about it, but personally, you know, in the interests of making our council open to the public, making it feel open and welcoming for the public to come and not so threatening. You know, we're used to this. A lot of members of the public aren't, and they feel nervous and threatened when they're sitting in that chair. And so I just like to try and take some of that away. I understand that administration likes to be prepared. So if there's a delegation that comes, they like to prep us with information so that we aren't presented with information that we can't answer. But at the same time, you know, if something comes up and a member of the public just wants to come and ask a question, I'd like them to have that opportunity as well. So I think we can manage it. I don't think, I haven't heard anything in the news where people have tried to hijack their meetings. I'm confident in our chair's ability to manage that process. So we have a recommended action that gives us some time to think about it. But that's where I'm coming from if anybody had any questions for me.
Councilor Wilhelm?
So Councilor Dean, would the idea be to provide that opportunity at every council meeting or at a regular interval? Like, what was your mindset on that?
It's a good question, Councillor Wilhelm. I had thought every council meeting, hadn't considered, you know, a specified interval. And also in my mind, you know, you'd allot 15 minutes. If you remember from that council meeting, there was nobody there that presented, and from what, you know, the digging I did, it rarely gets used. So I don't think it's something that we would anticipate having, you know, a parade of people there. So I think it's manageable if we put it on every council meeting.
I was just gonna ask if there was some framework around that particular thing.
There absolutely
and
is.
I'm
So
just gonna-
the town of Whitecourt's policy around it is it's very structured. Members of the public wishing to speak have to sign in. Members of the public shall begin by stating their name to council. Public members shall direct comments to the chair. Each public member shall have 2 minutes to speak. The chair may allot them additional time. Public members are not permitted to discuss matters that include personal, legal, land, or other FOIP-related items. They flesh it out there a bit more. And then specifically that public members cannot discuss matters that are already included on the agenda. The mayor will not allow discussion on agenda items that are time-sensitive in nature or items that have been previously deferred. If a public member is permitted to speak on a matter that is an item on that meeting agenda and the presentation provides new information which could result in a different course of action, the item will be deferred to a future meeting. And the public input session issues shall be either accepted as information, referred to administration for further information, or deferred.
All right,
So
thank you.
it's very
Yeah.
specific.
Councilor Prestige?
I think we have to take into consideration how many we do in a meeting. And we don't get 10 people coming.
And this specific policy doesn't have any outline of the maximum number of these that their council will consider. I know you had just, Councillor Dean, you had mentioned this specific public input session, so I did have the opportunity to pull it.
Thank
But
you.
we haven't had the opportunity to look to see what other municipalities may be doing outside of this specific framework.
Sure. Okay.
Councilor Wilhelm?
So thank you for digging up the towns thing. Could you send that to council so we could review it as well? And then if, as you're doing your research, maybe send that along as well. I agree with Councilor Dean, we should, because I've had that question asked of me before and I wasn't necessarily certain on how to direct the public to have their say in a council session. So I do think we should look at creating an opportunity for that. I'm not sure if it has to be at every council, but I would like to see what other councils are doing and then and use that to take into consideration.
Any other councilors wish to speak? Councilor Kush? Can you still hear us? Any comments?
Yeah, you sent it places. The city internet here died at the hotel.
Oh, just, okay.
I agree, you know, trying to get a little bit more input and stuff from the residents. And I'm not sure it'd be worth maybe finding a way to like vet their questions ahead of time so you can tell if it's something worthwhile having it on, or if it's just something that turns into a rant and rave session. Because we want to keep things going. I want the input, but if somebody's going to come in and just complain for the sake of complaining, I know 2 minutes is quick, but it still eats up time where somebody else with something valid could be saying something too. Just something to think about.
Yeah, and I think we can balance this out somewhere between, having, how do we put it, constructive criticism, because I'm always open to constructive criticism. And as elected officials, I think we have to be. It's just part of the, you get thicker skin and I forward you guys the emails, so you know what this is all about. So I think that there's an opportunity here certainly to have a framework where we can have people come and have a discussion with council. Councilman Dean?
I agree. I'm prepared to move the recommended action, but just before I do it, on the notion of, to use Councillor Cush's term, rant and rave, sometimes people just need an opportunity to get something off their chest too, and then it's out there, and they've actually had that opportunity, and I'm confident in our residents that there's going to be decorum, and there's going to they're going to follow protocol, and they're going to be polite. I have confidence in everybody. So I'm not afraid of that. I don't know the term confrontation. I guess like you say, it comes with this chair, so we have to be prepared for it. So with that, I would move that council directs administration to review and recommend amendments to the meeting procedures bylaw as discussed for consideration following the annual organizational meeting.
Okay. Any discussion on that motion further? All in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. I see Councillor Kush is in favor, so that is passed. And that actually brings us to the end of the meeting. So we've got to deal with item 7.1, which is the next meeting date, and schedule the next meeting.
September 15th.
Say again?
September 15th, right?
Yeah, it was in
At
our
3
calendar.
p.m.
Next week at 3.
Yeah,
The new one for October.
September 15th?
September 15th at 3, yeah. That's what.
It's already in your calendar. You all agreed to it.
Yeah, it is. Right. Okay, yeah, that's right, because we had another full agenda on the next one, because we like work. Okay. Do we need to fill that date in then? A motion to fill that date in?
No, it's already been made, so we
It's already
just,
been done?
yeah.
Then we're on to adjournment. Councillor Kush?
Make that motion to adjourn.
Okay, no discussion on a motion to adjourn. All in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. We are adjourned. Thanks very much.